Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell. I'm a doula in Washoe County, Nevada, a Medicaid provider, a lactation educator, childbirth educator, and mom of 18. You can find me and connect on doulainreno.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive in. Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm the host, Jennifer Campbell. Today, I'm here with Jim. Jim, pronounce your last name for me.
Pehkonen. I'm Jim Pehkonen.
Pehkonen. I should have asked you before and I didn't, but I knew I would butcher it. And we're going to start out a little bit differently. I'm going to actually have you start with your entrepreneurial journey.
Okay, so I am a coach. I call myself a life architect. I have been in business now for 18 years. I started out, I'm a coach because of the trauma I experienced as a child, and it took me about 20 years to heal myself. In my coaching business, I actually deal with people that have had deep trauma, and I love to say this, but the deeper the trauma, the easier the healing is. And then I also deal in addiction recovery, because if we look at addiction, and I don't want to go too far down this alley, but if we look at addiction, most addiction is based in people processing a lot of the trauma from their childhood. So it took me 20 years to heal mine, and it still impacts me today. I love coaching. I've worked in one of the top 5 recovery centers. I was their spiritual wild card. So anytime they had somebody that was a problem, they gave them to me. We worked together. If you're not seeing this, I air quote, I broke them so the therapeutic team could work with them, because I have a very unique understanding about the roots of trauma. I have 2 books. So the book that's coming out in the next day or two, really, it outlines how to heal trauma. But I also wrote a second book that I'll get into as a result of my, again, air quote, parenting experience.
So tell me about the connection with substance. You work with substance disorders, what's the specialty?
I work with substance abuse. I work with people that are in addiction, primarily chemical addiction. So if you are using alcohol or drugs to numb all of that pain inside, I have a very unique process where I get people to understand it to the point that they heal themselves. Matter of fact, in my new book, I have 12 stories of the people, and I'll outline one really quick. One of the gentlemen that at the recovery center had for 33 years had nightmares.
Wow.
We had one 45-minute session, and he has never had a nightmare since. He is now 6 years sober. I have worked with his management team and his company and all of his offices. The funny thing is after that 45-minute session, he literally transformed himself in that moment. And I had an agreement that I couldn't work with anybody for 1 year after it. On day 364, he reached out and he hired me as a coach. And in one of our early meetings, he says, after that session, the therapeutic team pulled me into a room and they said, "What did he do to you? We want to know everything." Unbeknownst to him, the therapeutic team also pulled me into a room and said, "What did you do with him? Because he's completely changed. He wasn't the same man he was before he went in that room." So he's my superstar, but I have hundreds of cases of people whose lives I've transformed, because I really believe that's why I'm still on this planet.
Wow. That came from, why did you get into that specifically?
So if we jump in the Wayback Machine and go back, I got out of college and I got into industry, and I would go into broken companies, fix them, turn them around, get them profitable, get scared that people would find out who I was, and I would leave. For my first 4 jobs, I was there roughly 3 years each, and I would leave. Each job, I was a tremendous success. then I went out and I worked for the government, and I was at a government site. We used to it used to be a 1 hour ride on a big bus. We called it the big yellow sleeping bus because we would sleep for an hour in the morning and an hour at night. And again, after 4 years, it was like my mind issues so haunted me, I left the job. And then when I moved to Utah, I went through a transformational program. When I went through that transformational program, I deeply understood why I did these behaviors that I did and why I felt like I had to run. And I spent the next 28 years living in Utah. It's just my work in addiction recovery was so popular, I couldn't go anywhere without being known, which is why, and then I also went through a second divorce, which is why I ended up moving to Reno. And the funny thing is a number of years ago, my youngest sister, we both did DNA tests because that was the
I just
thing.
did one, right? I just
Right,
did mine,
right.
right?
I gave it to her for her birthday, and she gave it to me for Christmas. And when she got her results, she said, "Jim, do you have a son?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she says, "Well," she says, "number one, I got to contact him on Monday morning because it says I'm just your half sister." And I said, "Well, you are my half sister. You mean nobody told you?"
Oh my gosh.
And she's like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "We've been joking about this for years." Now, at the time, I thought my parents were swingers. My dad was my best friend, and he passed 5 years ago, and he would never talk about those days. He talked about them in a different light. But what I've come to find out is my mom had affairs. And when my
Okay.
sister said, when I told my sister, I said, "Hey," I said, "your father is either this person or this person." And and then she said, "Well, you still have this son." And I said, "Be careful here." I said, "Because here's the thing." And just a side note, I am the black sheep of the family. I said, if I go in and do the DNA test for that company and find out that he is not my son, that means my brother had an affair on his wife. And
Okay.
and my brother passed 8 years ago, and my brother was the angel of the family. I said, so if we find out that my brother had an affair, now I'm going to be hated even more because I'm going to point out that my perfect brother may not have been so perfect. And my sister's like, "Oh," she's like, "I never thought of that." So I'm like, "Do you really want to open that can of worms?" So being the human that I am, guess what I did?
You took the DNA
I
test.
opened that can of worms. And
Right.
I remember the Sunday morning, I got the hit back and it said, "You have a son." And I still remember sitting down. I didn't know what, and I
Mm.
messaged him. It took him 3 hours and he messaged me back. And we went back and forth getting to know each other initially. And I just gave him my phone number. 45 minutes after giving him my phone number, his mother called. And and I'm like, I don't I don't know who you are. And she told me my name. She told me where we met. She told me where we went on our first date. She told me where we went on our second date. And then she's like, "And we slept together once, and you never called me." And she even sent me a picture of her. And I have no real memory, but the thought is like no, 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 no. And um and she got very belligerent on the phone, and she said that he would never be in my life. She says, "I promise you he will never ever be in your life." And what has occurred since then? First off, my sister and I really don't speak now, because my mother has promised to never speak to me again because I broke the family
Okay.
secret.
I
I had
mean,
Well, but we all knew. My father used to say that my youngest, my youngest sibling is not, he said, I know that she's not my biological daughter, but he raised her as if he was. And I had coffee, I want to say a year and a half ago with my sister. So like when I'm in the town that she's in, we sit down and we have a coffee. I can't, there's a whole other can of worms there that we may or may not get to, but I have to be a little private about my life because the feminine side of my family, they like finding all the holes and poking them at me. But my sister said that she had reached out because one of the two people that she said was the biological father she actually contacted, and he requested that she take all the DNA stuff down because he was still married to his wife. His wife did not know that he had had an affair back in 1968. And if you really want to take this to the next level, part of my issues is I was abused as a child. My parents went to Europe for 3 weeks and they left me with a pedophile. And it was I was abused for a short time, and I still remember, like, literally, because he would have me come over, and he always promised that he would bring a woman over, and but he abused me. For many years I didn't know if I was gay or straight. There was times I considered suicide because of this. But the irony of this whole story is, and when I finally broke it off, the abuse off, I told him that if he touched any of my siblings, I would tell everybody what happened. So while I was at college, he abused my youngest sister. So my youngest sister's father is the son of the man who abused both of us.
Holy convoluted. I mean, that's crazy. And oh my gosh, it's so much.
Yeah, so
That's so much.
I have so much compassion for my sister, and I now know that my parents were not swingers, that my mom had an affair.
And it was actually like her half brother that sexually abused you and her. Is that
It
right?
was it was the abuser's son, so it would have been
Oh, I got it.
her what is that?
Her
Her
grandfather? Okay, we
no,
got to,
her father, her grandfather abused her, and
right.
her father is
Was
who
the son.
bore her. Her father was the father with my
Yep.
mother.
Okay. And the interesting thing about this also is that your mom had an affair and this guy had an affair. And
Yes.
that's was your sister was the result. And your dad knew and still
Yes.
raised her as his own.
And that my father has told me that at the time that my mom got pregnant with my youngest, they were seriously considering divorce. But the moment she announced she was pregnant, he said he had to do the right thing and he couldn't divorce her.
I feel like that's so above and beyond the right thing. Like, I don't know what category that falls into. If he knew that that child wasn't his at that, I mean, you know,
Well,
if they weren't having sex, but she was, that's kind of a clear indication, right? And this
yeah.
wasn't her first affair.
I mean, that's only speculation.
Okay. But
Um,
none of the other
well,
siblings.
you want an even more bizarre story. When I was a senior in high school and when I was in my last semester of college, I walked in on my mom with another man, and he ended up being one of my clients at my first job because I'm from a small city
You've
in
got
the
to get out.
Midwest.
Like,
So I suspect that my mother had, yeah, and which is why I live out west. I suspect my mother had numerous affairs through the years, and
okay.
I am the opposite of my father in relationships. Anytime I see something, I run. I remember the year before they got married, he would send her flowers, and I used to go and sneak and read the notes, and the notes are said, "I know we can get this worked out." but the gaggle of ladies that my mother did everything with, she was the only married one. All the other ones, they were
Mm,
not married. And this would have been in the late 70s, early 80s.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, and it's interesting also that you said you don't have a good relationship because you told the secret, but the DNA report actually is what told the secret. You confirmed
Yes.
it and didn't
Yes.
realize she didn't know and had a conversation. So it's always perplexing to me where people put the, like, what an easy scapegoat. You told
Mhm.
but you told the secret, but you didn't, the DNA tested, you confirmed it, and guess what? It was her affair. Like,
It
so
was.
it's always crazy to me when people try to deflect and justify and put all of the onus onto this person who really had nothing to do with the situation. So
Right. But
always
it,
fascinating.
but when I walked in college, when I walked in on my mom, she told me to pack my stuff and get the hell out. And I told her I will when the person who pays the bills in this house tells me to. And I told her that in front of this man.
I mean, good for you. What was it like
So
working with him after? Did he recognize you as much
um
as
he didn't recognize me, and I was an engineer in a company, and he was in the purchasing department, so I only knew him through the salesman. But when I first saw him, I was like, and he didn't see, he pretended he didn't know me. So
interesting? Okay,
yeah.
so there's a lot to
So yeah.
unpack here. Um,
Yeah, where do you want to go next? Oh.
I think like your relationship with your sister, sadly, and I know you want to be protective, and I absolutely respect that 100%. But what a shame that that relationship broke down as a result of all of this. Just,
It really is, because she and I were it's just we we family dynamics are so, it's part of why I wrote the first book I wrote. It is a shame, and I have a lot of compassion with her. But after my second divorce, both of my sisters, my mother's sister, and my ex-wife, they all have a Facebook page where they talk about me because
oh,
somebody
they
was
do.
able to see it. And it's had me like, my life is an open book, but anything I my little sister was the one, we were very close, so anything I told made it into the gaggle. I made it into the group. And and the funny thing is I have a really great life, but sometimes people like finding the dirt on you.
Oh, I mean,
I
look,
mean,
if
sometimes.
I'm driving by a car accident, we want to see the train wreck. We may pray that
Yes.
everyone's okay,
That,
right? But we're gonna rubberneck as much as
yeah.
possible. I
Yeah.
I'm the same. I want to know what happened. I want to know if people
Mhm.
are okay. I want to, but we're all rubberneckers. So yes. And I don't have a relationship with my mom or my sister because of a book I
Yeah.
wrote about my
Yeah.
childhood. And I don't care. I didn't have a relationship with them before, really. And
Right.
if I
Right.
did, it wasn't based on any truth. So, I mean, was that a
Well,
loss? Not really.
it really wasn't. And you have to understand, my father, when my parents got divorced, my mother said, choose my mother, or your father or me. You have
Wow.
to choose. And for 22 years, I actually told her I wouldn't choose, that I would accept both of them. And my father and I ended up being we were best friends. My father ended up being married to the love of his life. They were married 24 years, 6 months before he passed. I saw him 2 weeks before he died, and he still calls her his blushing bride. They made every decision together. That is my standard for relationships. It's just a lot of my childhood trauma still get in the way. Although I am open to dating again. It's been 4 years since my divorce. And it's like finding my son was the it used to, because people would say, well, you're not a parent, you don't understand. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, I'm not a parent, I don't understand. And the funniest thing I say now is, well, it's like I've been a dad for a little under 2 years now. And people will be like, oh, really? Like, oh, how's your baby? And I'm like, he's 37.
Right.
And we actually developed a pretty good relationship initially. Um, and he lives in Iowa, which is where I grew up. And the first time I actually went back to Iowa for 3 weeks, hoping to meet him, meet his lady, and meet my two granddaughters.
Mm.
And I don't know what happened, but as soon as I got back to Iowa, we actually met for coffee, and he brought his youngest daughter, my youngest granddaughter, and we had coffee for about an hour and 20 minutes. And you want to know the weird thing? He looks like me. He talks like me. He has a career path similar to mine. He has hobbies similar to mine.
Yep.
He has health issues similar to mine. Yet he told me stories about the man that raised him, because she ended up marrying a man, but they didn't get married until 2007 or so. They lived together from right within the time he was born or a little bit after. And the funny thing was, he told me that the last and 6 months, 5 months, 6 months before we actually met, the man that raised him died.
Oh.
And if you want to understand the character of his mother, the last conversation he had with the man that raised him is he called him from a shed and said, your mom just doesn't believe that my cancer is real. And he was crying. And he's like, I don't know what it's going to take for her to actually understand I'm not that far from passing. And he passed after that.
Wow.
So it's funny because her phone isn't blocked, but I will never take a call from her because she is but she has influence on him. And last summer when I was in Iowa, literally the moment I crossed the border, I sent him a picture and he's like, yeah, I'm really excited to meet you. But then when I got to the town, he disappeared. And the day before I left, he's like, okay. I said, I'm available from this date to this date. And the day before I left, he says, okay. He says, maybe we can see you, when he knew I was going to be gone. And I'm like, I have to go back.
This is another one of those perplexing situations, because you found him inadvertently and reached out, which is definitely
Mm-hmm.
what I would do. And
Yes.
you knew nothing for 37 years. This had nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like your sister, you telling the family secret. You didn't have to. Like this DNA test. And the super fascinating thing is that when I did my DNA test, nothing exciting happened. First of all, I know I'm mostly Scottish and Irish. I mean, like,
Right. Yeah.
that's
Yes.
the end. I have a high chance of having blonde hair and blue eyes. Freaky. Um, I never would think about DNA tests doing this much. I mean, obviously, if you think about it, like I have no surprise children because I'm female.
Yes.
But even other surprises in the family and stuff, I mean, it's just crazy what these tests can do in a way that's
Mm-hmm.
not really positive, right?
Yeah. I joined. Well, the first thing I did is I looked for support. Like, how do you create communication with a 37-year-old that is your biological son? And I
Right.
found nothing. And I got on some Facebook groups. There's nothing out there. So,
Right.
in all honesty, what I did, I wrote a book.
Yep.
And the book is called DNA Results: Navigating Peaceful Family Dynamics. Because the one thing I want is just to develop a peaceful relationship with him.
It's
Because,
and you're the bad guy for
mhm,
finding out and finding him, but his mom's the one he listens to, and like
yeah, and I don't understand why, and I guess I don't like, why didn't she call me?
right. She
You
remembers your
know,
dates and everything, and you never called her back. She found out she was pregnant.
right.
That probably warrants a phone call.
But the thing is that would have shifted the dynamics of my life, because I would not have moved, because after I graduated college, my first job, I was 3 years, and then I got a promotion and a transfer to another state. I was there 3 years, and they wouldn't let me promote because it was like, uh, when you're unhealed going through life, there's a lot of neurosis, and I lived that neurosis until I transformed myself early in the century. And that's what my second book is about. The book that's coming out any day now it's about that book is called Wounds to Wisdom: The Art of Healing Trauma, because I took on, just around the turn of the century, I took on healing myself because I had had a divorce. I still love my first wife. I probably will always love my first wife. She had manic depressive issues. When she was in her really manic phase, she would be physical. And I literally told her, the next time you leave a mark, I'm divorcing you. She got manic one night and she left a black and blue mark. And the sad part was, is I used to have to hold her down when she was in her manic phases, and she would just yell and scream and punch. And to this day, I really still do have deep love. It's Life is weird because since I've healed myself, I have a deeper sense of love for her.
Mm,
I just at the time was so untransformed myself, I didn't know how to handle that level of depression.
yeah.
And now that I've gone through my healing process, and I've done 10 ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru. I use psychedelic mushrooms. I use psychedelic mushrooms in my practice because I don't know if you know, people that take micro dosing or they take therapeutic dosing, it is the quickest way to free yourself from trauma. And I always imagine trauma as, it's like your brain, and trauma is the claw of fear that holds your brain so tight that you're just going through these looped programs and you just keep making the same errors again and again and again. And like, one of the things I love about being a coach is I assist people to free that claw. And my company's name is Amazing Life Design, right? Quick pitch, AmazingLifeDesign.com. But I do that because our birthright is to have a magnificent life in spite of the childhood traumas that each person goes through.
I always thought, I went through a lot of trauma, and it was very dysfunctional trauma growing up, and I was going to do such a great job with my kids. And what I'm here to tell you is that I screwed them up. I mean,
Well,
that wasn't my intention. It wasn't
right,
dysfunctional.
right.
But you inadvertently, even when you're giving 100% and you're doing the
Mm-hmm.
best job and it is your priority, there's like no way around the fact that kids are going to be subjected to all kinds of different situations,
Right.
even being bullied at school, but not feeling like they can talk about it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a
So,
myriad. So
mm-hmm.
they all
may
have
I
trauma.
may I reframe
Sure.
what you said? Because I like one of the right now, I want to say I have 3 or 4 people under 18. One of the things that I know about parents, and I tell this, it's usually about month 2 or 3 into our work together. I said, can you begin to see that your parents did the best job they could for what they know? So, Jen, I'm going to say to you, I don't think you screwed your kids up. I think you did the best job
Mm-hmm.
you could with everything you had. And it is one of our many birthrights. Trauma is one of our birthrights. And people are going to lash out and say no. But here's the thing, we all go through a
Mm-hmm.
level of trauma.
Yep.
Different people deal with it differently.
Yeah.
And the reason I do the work I do is because I can, there is a synergy there that I can spiritually meet somebody wherever they are and transform them. And the reason I wrote this second book is it's time. We are in a time in life where trauma is just, it's it's so commonplace. COVID so impacted how we create this experience of life. And, you know, for my dissenters, well, he doesn't have a relationship with the female side of his family. And he doesn't, right now, he really doesn't have much of a relationship with his son. So how could he do this? But the thing is don't make the mistakes I have. I wrote this book because I have a process. And the thing about relationships is relationships take two sides. There's a chapter in my DNA book about what if they don't want a relationship? My son does not want a relationship, and it kills me, but I have to honor him. I have to honor his life. I have to honor his wife. I have to honor my granddaughters. It is his choice, but we all go through trauma. It's just some of us learn how to deal with it different. The whole intention of my second book is so that more people can heal the trauma and they deal with life different.
And you can't force other people to heal their own either, which, I have a relationship, a great relationship with most of my kids, but there's a couple I don't. And
yeah,
I did do the best job that I could, and I am sorry you don't want a relationship. That's not what I want. But I absolutely respect it because I didn't want one with my parents. So,
and you are a phenomenal human. And if you are listening to this podcast, you're a phenomenal human. Let that in. We have to start focusing. The mind is a funny thing, right? If you look at little babies, they have love and not of love. And that's the two states that they're in. If you look at an emotion chart as an adult, and let's say that emotion chart has 30 emotions with 30 different words with the faces. How many of those do you think are negative?
I don't know.
22.
Yeah. It's crazy.
How many are positive?
Like 10 if you said there's 32. 5? And some are neutral. We literally, our human experience is literally has a 3-to-1 ratio of being geared towards the negative. And the minute you can begin understand that, right? And the thoughts, because all the thoughts are coming up in our mind. They really are just coming up in our mind. You can begin to see and hone in on. And the other thing, like my work, it's getting people to deeply understand how you create that experience. So when all those thoughts come up, as opposed to picking, the 2/3 option of the negative, what if you actually go for the neutral or maybe even the positive? Because we can't all be happy all the time. Right.
But we can choose our state of being. And one of the things about becoming a father for 18 months to a 37-year-old is it gives me a whole different perspective on humanity, because I didn't experience anything with him. I didn't experience any of the things that he went through. And he did tell me that he has no malice towards me, but he wouldn't go any further. And I don't, and I do know that the youngest daughter was never going to be taken care of by the grandmother, because the oldest daughter was beginning to go into therapy because the grandmother used to take care of her, and they were noticing some behaviors that they didn't like. And I'm just like, that crushes me, that this 13, 14-year-old, 14 years old now, this young woman is being influenced by somebody that doesn't have her highest and best in order.
Wow.
And I have to stop for a minute because the mother of my son obviously had deep trauma. And when I didn't call for whatever reason, I got to stop laughing when I say that, because it's like, who knows where she went with her story, and who knows how that triggered her. But she knew that if she told me I was the father, I would have been in that child's life.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to blame you for not being there while at the same time making the decision to not allow you to, because that she knew you would be. Like
Yeah.
that's a dysfunctional sentence. You've been married twice and you're open to dating again. Did you ever plan on having kids?
Um, that's here's my sole open thought about that. Had I not been abused as a child, I would probably be a veterinarian in the state of Iowa. My youngest child would have graduated from some college probably this year, as a matter of
Mm,
fact, and I would have led a very normal life. But and if you really want to go a little deeper, when I was around 9 or 10, I was abused by a 16-year-old woman. And the funny thing was, is when that abuse happened, her father was on the other side of the wall every time it happened. And I was terrified of him walking in. I was a paper boy at the time. So between the impact of that and being left with a pedophile, I had a lot of confusion as a child. I am a straight man, and I also accept everybody. I am a straight man, but I struggle in relationships.
yeah.
My second marriage, I thought, was going to be the one. While when I first met her, we literally like moved in as she was getting a divorce, and that's I lived with her for 7 years. And a number of years ago, I got cancer,
Mm,
and this is when things were kind of going down. And I had kidney cancer, and I had to have everything prepared in case I died. So then 3 weeks, I got the will, I got everything ready. And after I actually survived, that's a whole nother story about how you actually waking up when you're going under, and you might die. And they're like, we have to go in, we have to remove this tumor, and you might die. When you wake up, your world is a completely different world. But I still remember the time when she told me, you were on my insurance, so you owe me your life. You should be grateful to me forever. You owe me your life. And um, it was a very dysfunctional relationship. And there was a time that her oldest daughter did something. Her oldest daughter was very, very, very disrespectful to me, and I did my best. I picked the dog up because since I survived cancer, I actually got a dog, and we used to sit with people, and I had a therapy dog, and we would sit with people that had cancer. That was my give back for living. I picked the dog up, I walked out of the house, and I never walked back in. I spent, and that was the weird thing was, is that was just as COVID was beginning. So my second ex-wife, was under a lot of stress, which it was just our marriage was crumbling. We'd been married a little over a year. Our marriage was crumbling. Everything about our life was crumbling. And I just picked that dog up and moved and walked out. And I came back a day later. She had all my clothes out, and we got divorced in December of that year. And I spent COVID on the side of a hill with me and a dog. And
that was probably a better way than a lot of us spent it.
it was really beautiful. But at the end of the day, um, at the end of the day, had I not been abused, I probably would have left a really normal life.
Mm,
And I've had a pretty colorful life. If I died tomorrow, I'm happy. Like,
yeah.
but I'm not dying yet, because there's more people. Like, healing is your birthright. And if you're a parent and you're struggling with communication with a child, there's a book called DNA Results, Navigating Peaceful Family Dynamics. It's all about how to create. It's the 10 C's of creating effective communication. My mentor at the time said I should have just wrote that for people around communicating in relationships, but I had just discovered my son, I'm really not, since I feel like there's a bit of failure in the relationship with my son. I don't really, I don't talk about the book much.
Wow.
Um, I'm more like right now, I'm excited about my other book, Wounds to Wisdom, the art of healing trauma, because at the end of the day, this is what humanity needs. It is time to heal. And if you're listening to this, I'm going to do a shameless little plug myself, but are you ready to heal? I outline all but one or two of the steps I do in my coaching. I just flat outlined in the book because my mentor once told me, I said, my coaching is so unique that I couldn't write it down.
Right.
And she literally 3 hours later, we had all 12 steps written out that I do when I transform people.
I want to end with how people can best get in touch with you, Jim, because this has been a whirlwind of a story for sure.
People can best get in touch with me by emailing me at jim@amazinglifedesign.com. That is my best email.
And we have
The
all the
website.
show notes, all the links are in the show
Okay.
notes. So
Yeah. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. It comes, right to my little addiction in the pocket, which is
yeah.
this thing.
Yeah, we're all
So
guilty of that. Jim, thank
I
you
know.
so much for being on. It was a real blast to talk to you. I appreciate you.
Thank you for the invite. And for those of you listening, thank you for listening. And I really hope to, whether this book or whatever you use, I really hope you create an incredible life.